This is Group 6 in Section 6 of Animal Science 67, Animals and Society. I, Maddie Michaelson, will be talking with Grace Winterstrom and Aiden Melvin, arguing for allowing GMOs in animal feed. To understand why GMOs should be allowed in animal feed, we should start by discussing the history and background of GMOs. GMO stands for Genetically Modified Organism. GMOs are living beings that have had their genetic code changed in some way. Since organisms are found all around us, this means that GMOs can be found in many places. Some common places you can find GMOs are fruits, vegetables, fish, meat, and even plants such as cotton and your daily medicines. For example, bacteriums are organisms that can be genetically modified to create medicines and vaccines. One common medicine that comes from a GM source is insulin. During its early stages, insulin would be extracted from the pancreas of cattle and pigs, which was then given to humans because it was so similar to human insulin that it could treat people with diabetes. The first big breakthrough in GMO technology was in 1973 thanks to Herbert Boyer and Stanley Cohen. The two scientists developed a method where they could cut out a gene from one organism and put it into another. Using their method, they transferred a gene with antibiotic resistance to a second strain of bacteria, which successfully gave antibiotic resistance to the second strain. A year later, Rudolf Janisch and Beatrice Mintz used a very similar procedure in animals. Their procedure was used to introduce foreign DNA into mouse embryos. Another year later, the Asilomar Conference took place. Here, scientists, lawyers, and government officials gathered to discuss safety and guidelines that needed to be set in place if these experiments were to continue. After 3 days of discussion, safety and containment regulations along with guidelines were established which allowed the scientific community to keep advancing. This launched a new era of modern genetic modification. Now we will discuss ethical aspects involved in using GMO in animal feed. To start off, GMOs in animal feed are tested constantly to make sure that they are safe for animals. For example, feed analysis is used to ensure that the feed is examined for anti-nutrients and contaminants such as toxin-producing fungus. Feed source is used to ensure that crops should be grown in the same place in the same year because genetic background and environment can cause differences in nutrition and quality of the feed. Controls are used to make sure that GMOs used in the feed have no serious effects on the animals as if there wasn't any GMOs in the feed. Appropriate statistical tests should be used to ensure that the GMOs have no significant effect on the animals, and the tests conducted must have reproducibility. If results vary, changes need to be made so that the same outcome happens every time. And lastly, relevance is used to show that a measured difference does not necessarily indicate harm. Differences can occur between each variation of the species and between different animals. Also, the FDA Center for Veterinary Medicine regulates and ensures the safety of GMOs in animal feed. According to the FDA, it requires that all food for animals, like food for humans, be safe for animals to eat, be produced under clean conditions, contain no harmful substances, and be accurately labeled. Lastly, animals who eat feed that contain GMOs process and digest the feed exactly the same as feed that doesn't contain GMOs. A study by Alison Van Enem, PhD of the University of California, Davis, showed that genetically engineered feed and food is safe and found no nutritional differences in the milk, meat, or eggs produced by animals who consume feed containing GMOs. GMOs have a very important cultural and sociological impact on the world. GMOs allow for crops to be more accessible. Ingredients that are necessary for feed can now be grown all year long. For example, corn is a very important ingredient used in many feeds, but is mainly produced during the spring and summer. With the help of GMOs, it can now be produced all year long. GMOs can also help prevent crop loss. This is essential to farmers, but also to animals. The most common traits found in GMO crops are resistance to insect damage, tolerance to herbicides, and resistance to plant viruses. With these traits, farmers are less likely to lose crops, which increases their output and makes more food readily available to families for dinner, and even to feed companies so that they can produce more feed. If farmers did not have access to GMOs, they would have to plant additional acres and acres of crops, which isn't always available to them. GMOs can also help solve many hunger and malnutrition problems. When farmers use GMOs, it can help foods become more accessible and affordable to consumers. For example, there are GMO apples available that do not brown when cut, and this may help reduce food waste. Using GMOs is not the only to help us in the United States, but it can also help other countries. The U.S. Agency for International Development is working with partner countries to use genetic engineering to improve staple crops. They have developed a GMO eggplant to be insect resistant, which reduces the exposure to pesticides and reduces the chance that the food will become contaminated.
Hello, my name is Aiden Melvin. I'm a part of Group 6, Section 6 of the Animal Science 67 class, Animals and Society. Along with Maddie Michaelson and Grace Winterstrom, we will be arguing for the use of GMOs in animal feed. One major controversy surrounding the use of genetically modified organisms in animal feed is whether or not these GMOs are healthy for the animals to ingest, as well as if there are any possible side effects for humans who eat the animal products from animals raised on GMOs. However, the FDA has shown that there are no negative impacts on these animals or the people who ingest them or their products caused by the GMOs. In fact, many of the GMOs are not actually intended to have any impact on the nutritional value of the food. They are just meant to have an increase in the crop yield per acre for the farmers. To do this, GMOs are used to increase a resistance in herbicides, pesticides, as well as viruses. These resistances make it so that there is a higher crop yield, actually decreasing the price for consumers of these crops. On the chart on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see that the use of herbicides on corn, cotton, and soybeans has drastically increased since we have developed GMOs that are resistant to the herbicides Roundup. This resistance allows us to use more of these herbicides to protect the crops while not endangering the actual crops themselves. The significance of this being used with corn is that corn is a very common ingredient in most animal feeds. The majority of the corn produced in the United States is actually used in animal feed. As I mentioned on the previous slide, GMOs that are used in animal feed are tested to ensure that they are safe for the animal consumption and that there is no impact on the products produced by these animals on the humans that use them. Also, the GMOs are very cost effective to use for the animal feed compared to organic or non-GMO crops. This is due to, as mentioned in the previous slide, the higher crop yield per acre for genetically modified organisms compared to the organic crops. This is due to their resistance to viruses, herbicides, and pesticides. With this higher crop yield, we can actually increase the amount of crops produced while decreasing the use of land for growing crops, mainly for animal feed. Genetically modified organisms already make up the vast majority of the crops grown in the United States, especially corn, which is around 88% genetically modified organisms compared to only 12% organic. These GMOs also allow for crops to be grown year-round because some GMOs are bred to be drought resistant compared to the organic plants. This allows for animal feed to be able to be produced year-round, so there's not an off-season for the crops that go into our animal feed. If this were the case, less nutrition rich crops would be used in our animal feed, overall decreasing the health of the animals we are using for our meat and poultry, eggs, and dairy. This use of GMOs does also allow for more animals to be fed every year, increasing the amount of food supply available for the United States as well as the rest of the world, with our growing population expected to increase by 20% in 2050. The global food production must also increase to match this growing demand. The use of GMOs will help us reach this desired growth and can help with the world hunger situation we are currently facing.
My name is Grace Winterstrom, and I'm a part of Group 6, Section 6 of Animal Science 67. I will be arguing for why GMOs should be used in animal feed, along with Maddie, Michaelson, and Aiden, Melvin. Most of the corn and soybeans grown in the United States are used in animal feed and have been genetically modified to allow them to grow better. 72% of the corn and 60% of soybeans that is grown in the United States is used in animal feed. The majority of animal feed has GMOs in them, and many people are concerned of the effects that this may have on people after they consume animal products such as meat, eggs, cheese, and milk of animals who have been fed feed that contains GMOs. There are, however, no negative effects of consuming these products, and testing has been done and found that none of the genetically modified DNA from the animal feed can be found in the animal products. GMOs do not have negative effects on the animals either. They are very beneficial, making the corn and soybeans easier and cheaper to grow. Animals who are fed only organic feed and animals who are fed feed containing GMOs have both been tested, and it has been proven that there is little to no difference in the animals. The animals digest the food the same way, and it does not change the nutrients of any of the animal's products. In the figure below, you can see that corn and soybeans are among the most grown product not only in the United States, but in the world. Soybean is grown in 11 countries and has 81% of global planting, and corn is grown in 17 countries with 35% of global planting. And they are among the top 4 genetically modified crops. GMOs are very beneficial in agriculture, as they make it easier and more cost-effective to grow crops and require less land to produce the crops, which is very important as land becomes less available to use in agriculture. The majority of the food grown in the United States with GMOs are used in animal feed. Many people are under the impression that the food has negative effects on the animals, yet this is untrue. The genetically modified food is tested for years before it is even allowed on the market to make sure it is safe for both people and animals. All GMOs are studied for 12 to 15 years before they are even put on the market, and then they are continued to be studied after they're on the market to make sure they don't affect any animals or people and that they're healthy for everybody. The animals that are fed GMOs have little to no difference in how they digest their food and the nutrients they receive from it as those who consume organic feed. It is more cost-effective to produce genetically modified feed compared to organic feed, seeing as most of the crops grown have already been genetically modified. It is more beneficial to the economy and the environment to produce crops that have been genetically modified, and they have no effect on the animals or the products. To conclude our presentation, here is a list of sources we used to conduct our research and put together this project.